The thunder of hooves broke the morning silence as Zane Quinn raced across the Wyoming plains, his gut twisted with a feeling he couldn't explain. An abandoned barn on the eastern edge of his property had been plaguing his dreams for days. Something called him there on this crisp autumn morning of 1876, something urgent that wouldn't let him rest. The weathered structure came into view as the sun crested the distant mountains. Zane slowed his stallion, Thunderbolt, to a walk as they approached. The barn had belonged to the Wilsons before they'd packed up and fled after last year's brutal winter. No one had claimed the land since, and Zane had been meaning to see if the structure could be salvaged for his expanding cattle operation outside Fort Laramie. Dismounting, Zane approached cautiously. The door hung partially open, creaking in the gentle breeze. He pushed it wider, allowing morning light to spill across the dirt floor. The musty scent of old hay and abandonment filled his nostrils. "Hello," he called, his voice echoing in the emptiness. A soft, muffled sound answered him from the shadows. Zane's hand moved instinctively to his revolver as he stepped further inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. The sound came again, a whimper, unmistakably human. Following it to the back corner of the barn, Zane's blood ran cold at what he found. A woman sat huddled against the wall, her wrists bound with heavy iron shackles, chained to a support beam. Her dress was torn and dirty, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around a face streaked with grime and dried tears. Despite her condition, her eyes met his with defiance. "Dear God," Zane breathed, holstering his weapon and rushing toward her. "Who did this to you?" She shrank back against the wall, eyes wide with fear. "I won't hurt you," he said, softening his voice. "I'm going to get you out of here." The chain was secured with a heavy padlock. Zane examined it, jaw clenched in anger. "I'll need tools from my ranch. I'll be back as quickly as I can. Here." He removed his canteen and offered it to her. When she hesitated, he set it on the ground within her reach. "It's just water." He shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "I'm Zane Quinn. I own the cattle ranch to the west. What's your name?" Her lips parted, cracked and dry. "Brielle," she whispered hoarsely. "Brielle Vanders. Miss Vanders, I give you my word I'll return within the hour. Is there anyone looking for you? Anyone I should send word to?" She shook her head slowly, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "No one knows I'm here." "The men who did this, gone," she said. "They left 2 days ago, said they'd be back." A shudder ran through her body, Zane's jaw tightened. "They won't touch you again, I promise you that." He stood, reluctant to leave her but knowing he needed tools to free her. "Drink the water. I'll be back before you know it." True to his word, Zane returned in under an hour with tools, food, and fresh clothing borrowed from his housekeeper. With bolt cutters from his tool shed, he made quick work of the chain, though the shackles would require a blacksmith's attention. "I'm taking you to my ranch," he told her as he helped her to her feet. Her legs buckled, weak from disuse, and he caught her before she fell. "You'll be safe there. My housekeeper, Mrs. Donovan, will help get you situated." "Why are you helping me?" Brielle asked, her voice stronger now that she'd had water and a bit of bread. "What kind of man would I be if I didn't?" Zane replied simply. He helped her onto Thunderbolt, then mounted behind her. "Hold on, it's not far." The ride to Zane's ranch was silent, Brielle leaning against his chest more from necessity than choice. His ranch house came into view, a substantial 2-story structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings scattered across well-kept grounds. Cattle grazed in distant pastures and smoke curled from the chimney. Mrs. Donovan, a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair and a kind face, rushed out when she saw them approach. Her eyes widened at the sight of Brielle. "Saints preserve us! What happened?" she exclaimed. Found her chained in the Wilson place, Zane explained, dismounting and helping Brielle down. She needs care, Martha. Of course she does. Bring her in quickly now. Within hours, Brielle had been bathed, dressed in clean clothes, and settled in the guest bedroom. The local doctor had been summoned to attend to her raw wrists and examine her for other injuries. Mrs. Donovan prepared a hearty stew, insisting Brielle needed to regain her strength. "You're lucky Mr. Quinn found you when he did, Mrs. Donovan said as she bustled around the bedroom, straightening things that didn't need straightening. "Most decent folk avoid that old barn. They say it's haunted by Mr. Wilson's ghost." "Martha," Zane warned from the doorway, "Miss Vanders doesn't need ghost stories right now." "Of course, Mr. Quinn, forgive my chatter." She patted Brielle's hand. "You rest now, dear, you're safe here." After Mrs. Donovan left, Zane lingered in the doorway. "The blacksmith will come tomorrow to remove those," he said, nodding toward the shackles that still encircled her wrists, though no longer connected by chain. "I've also sent word to Sheriff Tate. He'll want to talk to you when you're feeling up to it." Brielle nodded, fingers tracing the iron bands. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You feel ready to tell me what happened? Who did this to you?" She looked away, her shoulders tensing. "They called themselves the Blackwell Gang, 4 men led by a man named James Blackwell. They attacked the stagecoach I was traveling on, killed the driver and the guard." Her voice broke. "There was an elderly couple. They killed them too." Zane's expression darkened. "The Cottonwood Creek robbery, that was 3 weeks ago." Brielle nodded. "They kept me at first because—" She swallowed hard. "Because James Blackwell decided he wanted me. When he tired of me, they were going to sell me to a brothel in Deadwood. They left to make arrangements." Fury flashed in Zane's eyes, but he kept his voice gentle. "Where were you headed before this happened?" "Fort Laramie. My uncle lives there or lived there. Daniel Vanders. I'd received word he was ill, so I was coming from Boston to care for him." Zane's brow furrowed. "Daniel Vanders, the school teacher?" "Yes, do you know him?" A shadow crossed Zane's face. "I'm sorry, Miss Vanders. Your uncle passed away 2 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him quickly." Tears spilled down Brielle's cheeks. "I feared as much when weeks passed. He was my only family." Zane stepped into the room, drawn by her grief. "I'm truly sorry for your loss. Your uncle was well respected in town. Taught half the children around here, including my foreman's son. And now I have nowhere to go," she whispered, the realization washing over her. "No family, no home, no money." "You have a place here until you decide what you want to do," Zane said firmly. "No arguments, now get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Over the following days, Brielle gradually regained her strength. The blacksmith removed her shackles, leaving only faint scars as a reminder of her captivity. Sheriff Tate took her statement, promising to alert neighboring counties about the Blackwell Gang, though he warned they might have already fled the territory. A week after her rescue, Brielle joined Zane on the porch after supper, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. They had fallen into a comfortable routine, taking their evening coffee together while watching the sunset. "I can't impose on your hospitality much longer," she said, breaking their companionable silence. Zane turned to her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "You're not imposing. In fact, Mrs. Donovan has been happier than I've seen her in years, having another woman in the house." Brielle smiled faintly. "She's been very kind, but I need to find my own way. I thought perhaps I might apply for a position in town. I was a teacher in Boston, like my uncle." "Fort Laramie needs a school teacher," Zane acknowledged. "The children have been without proper instruction since your uncle fell ill." "Then it's settled. I'll speak with the town council." "I'll take you into town tomorrow," Zane offered. "Introduce you to some folks who can help." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "For everything, Mr. Quinn." "Zane," he corrected. "After all we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities, Miss Vanders." "Brielle," she responded with a small smile. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of a connection neither had anticipated. The next morning, Zane drove Brielle into Fort Laramie in his wagon. The small frontier town bustled with activity. Cowboys mingled with soldiers from the nearby fort, merchants hawked their wares, and women hurried about their shopping. Brielle drew curious glances, being both a newcomer and in the company of one of the area's most prosperous ranchers. Zane introduced her to Mayor Jenkins, a portly man with an impressive mustache, who was delighted at the prospect of reopening the school. "Daniel Vanders was a fine educator," the mayor said, shaking Brielle's hand vigorously. "If you're half as dedicated as your uncle, our children will be fortunate indeed." By the end of the day, arrangements had been made. The town council voted unanimously to appoint Brielle as the new schoolteacher. She would live in the small house attached to the schoolhouse, which had been her uncle's home. The position came with a modest salary, enough for her to live independently. "You can move in next week," Mayor Jenkins informed her. "We'll need time to clean the place up." As they drove back to the ranch, Brielle sat quietly, emotions warring within her. Relief at securing a position mixed with apprehension about living alone after her ordeal, and surprisingly, sadness at the thought of leaving Zane's ranch. "You've gone quiet," Zane observed. "Just thinking about everything that's happened. A month ago, I was teaching children in Boston, living a predictable life. Then my uncle's letter came and everything changed." "Do you regret coming west?" She considered the question seriously. "Despite everything, no. There's something about this land. It feels more honest somehow. In Boston, everything is hidden behind politeness and proper behavior. Here, the dangers are real, but so is the kindness." She glanced at him. "I wouldn't have survived without your help." "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said. "Most people wouldn't have endured what you did and still have the courage to start over." A comfortable silence fell between them as the wagon rattled along the dirt road. The sprawling landscape stretched around them, painted gold by the late afternoon sun. In the distance, a herd of antelope bounded across the plains. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Zane murmured, following her gaze. "That's what keeps me here. Some days when I'm out riding the property at dawn and the sun breaks over those mountains, I feel like the luckiest man alive." "I can understand that," Brielle said softly. "I never imagined such vastness could exist. It makes Boston seem so confined." When they returned to the ranch, Mrs. Donovan greeted them with news that Brielle's belongings had been located in the stagecoach company's unclaimed storage. They'd be delivered to her uncle's house in town. "At least I'll have something of my old life," Brielle said, relieved. "Though most of it is just books and clothing." The following days passed quickly as Brielle prepared for her new position. Zane took her to visit the schoolhouse, which needed some repairs but was structurally sound. The attached living quarters were modest, just a bedroom, small parlor and kitchen, but clean and comfortable. "It's perfect," she told Zane as they inspected the rooms. "I can make this a home." On her last evening at the ranch, Mrs. Donovan prepared a special dinner to bid her farewell. The housekeeper had grown fond of Brielle during her stay, treating her with maternal affection. "You must visit often," Mrs. Donovan insisted as she served apple pie for dessert. "This house needs a woman's laughter." "I'm sure Miss Vanders will be busy with her students," Zane said, though his eyes conveyed a different message when they met Brielle's across the table. That night, unable to sleep, Brielle stepped out onto the porch. The moon cast silver light across the landscape, and the distant howl of a coyote echoed through the night. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the crisp air. Couldn't sleep. Zane's voice came from the darkness. He stepped into the moonlight, having emerged from the barn. "Too much on my mind," she admitted. "What about you? Just checking on a new foal." He joined her at the porch railing. "Nervous about tomorrow, a little. It's strange, I've taught for years, but this feels different. These children have had such different lives from my students in Boston." "They'll love you," Zane said with quiet certainty. "You have a way about you, a gentleness combined with strength. Children respond to that." His words warmed her more than the shawl. "Thank you." They stood in silence for a moment, the night sounds surrounding them. "Brielle," Zane began, then hesitated. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I want you to know that you're always welcome here. Not just as a guest or a friend in need, but—" He paused, searching for words. "But," she prompted softly. "But as someone I've come to care for," he finished. "More than I expected to." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. "I've come to care for you too," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved my life, Zane, not just by finding me, but by showing me kindness when I'd lost faith in humanity." He turned to face her fully, moonlight illuminating his features. "May I call on you? Properly, I mean." "Once you're settled." A smile spread across her face. "I'd like that very much." The next morning, Zane drove Brielle to town in his best wagon. Her few possessions were loaded in the back, along with some supplies Mrs. Donovan had insisted she take preserves, fresh bread, and a patchwork quilt the housekeeper had made for her. Fort Laramie welcomed its new schoolteacher with enthusiasm. Several town women had prepared the house, leaving wildflowers on the table and stocking the pantry with essentials. Mayor Jenkins presented her with a new ledger for school records and a brass bell to call students to class. "School starts Monday morning," he reminded her. "Expect about 20 children of various ages. Some ride in from ranches miles away." After the mayor and other well-wishers departed, Zane helped Brielle arrange her belongings in the small house. It felt strange to be alone with him in what was now her home, an intimacy neither had anticipated. "It looks like you'll do fine here," he said as they finished. He lingered by the door, hat in hand. "If you need anything, I know where to find you," she finished with a smile. He nodded, suddenly awkward. "Sunday dinner at the ranch. Mrs. Donovan will be disappointed if you refuse." "I wouldn't miss it." After he left, Brielle stood in the center of her new home, listening to the unfamiliar sounds. Distant voices from the street, the creak of the building settling, the flutter of curtains in the breeze. It was a far cry from the bustling city sounds of Boston or the open expanse of Zane's ranch. But it was hers, a new beginning. Monday morning arrived with bright sunshine and a flurry of nervous excitement. Brielle donned her best dress, a deep blue wool that Mrs. Donovan had altered to fit her, and arranged her hair in a simple but neat style. At 8 o'clock, she rang the school bell, its clear tone carrying across the town. Children materialized from all directions, some clean and well-dressed, others in patched clothing with dirt-smudged faces. All regarded her with curiosity as they filed into the schoolhouse. Mothers brought the youngest ones, eyeing Brielle with equal parts hope and skepticism. "Good morning," Brielle greeted them, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I'm Miss Vanders, your new teacher." A small boy in the front row raised his hand. "Are you Mr. Vanders' daughter?" "His niece," she corrected gently. "I've come from Boston to continue his work." "My pa says Boston folks think they're better than us," another child piped up from the back. Brielle smiled. "Your pa hasn't met this particular Boston folk, then?" "I have much to learn about Wyoming, and I'm hoping you'll all help teach me." The children relaxed visibly at this admission, and the day proceeded smoothly from there. Brielle assessed their knowledge, finding most had solid basics in reading and arithmetic thanks to her uncle's teaching. By the end of the day, she'd begun to match names with faces and personalities. As the children departed, a familiar wagon pulled up outside. Zane leaned against it, waiting until the last child had gone before approaching. "How was your first day, Miss Vanders?" he asked, his formal address belied by the warmth in his eyes. "Challenging but rewarding," she replied. "These children are bright and eager to learn. Most of them haven't had proper schooling since your uncle fell ill. The parents are grateful you're here." He walked her to her door, maintaining a respectable distance that nonetheless felt intimate. "I thought you might like to ride out to my ranch on Saturday. There's a place I'd like to show you, a waterfall not many know about." "I'd love that," she said. "Thank you." The week fell into a pattern. School during the day, lesson preparation and grading in the evenings. Townspeople stopped by regularly, some to welcome her, others to assess the newcomer who'd taken up such an important position in their community. By Friday, Brielle felt as though she'd always been part of Fort Laramie. Saturday dawned clear and mild. Brielle dressed in her riding habit, one of the few practical garments she'd brought from Boston, and waited eagerly for Zane. He arrived precisely at 10, leading an extra horse, a gentle mare named Buttercup. "She's one of our most reliable mounts," Zane assured her as he helped her into the saddle. "Perfect for someone who hasn't ridden much." "I rode occasionally in Boston," Brielle said, adjusting her skirts. "Though never across open country like this." They rode at a leisurely pace, Zane pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the land. They passed through a portion of his property, where cattle grazed on verdant grass, then into wilder territory marked by rocky outcroppings and stands of aspen trees beginning to turn golden with autumn. "It's just ahead," Zane said after they'd ridden for nearly an hour. The sound of rushing water reached them before they saw the source. Rounding a bend in a narrow canyon, Brielle gasped at the sight before her. A waterfall cascaded down a rocky cliff, splashing into a clear pool below. Wildflowers still bloomed along the banks, and a rainbow arched through the mist where sunlight hit the falling water. "Oh, Zane," she breathed. "It's magnificent." They dismounted, securing the horses to a nearby tree. Zane spread a blanket on a grassy spot near the pool and unpacked a lunch missus. Donovan had prepared cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apple tarts. As they ate, Brielle found herself studying Zane, the way sunlight highlighted the angles of his face, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. In the 3 weeks since he'd found her, she'd come to know him as a man of integrity, kindness, and quiet strength. Yet there remained a reserve about him, a part of himself he kept hidden. "Tell me about your family," she said. "You know about mine or lack thereof, but you rarely mention yours." A shadow passed over his face. "Not much to tell. My father brought us west when I was 12. He had dreams of building a cattle empire. My mother died on the journey cholera. My younger sister followed a month later." "I'm so sorry," Brielle said softly. Zane nodded, his gaze distant. "My father built this ranch from nothing, worked himself to death doing it. He passed 5 years ago, leaving everything to me." He looked around at the landscape. "Sometimes I wonder if it was worth the price he paid, that we all paid. And yet you stayed." "This land gets in your blood," he said simply. "Despite everything, I can't imagine living anywhere else." He turned to her. "What about you? Will you stay in Wyoming, or is this just a temporary stop before you return east?" The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. Brielle considered it carefully. When I first came west, I thought I'd stay only long enough to help my uncle recover, then return to Boston. Now, she gazed at the waterfall. Now I can't imagine going back. There's a freedom here I never knew in Boston. Despite the dangers, or perhaps because of them, life feels more authentic. Something eased in Zane's expression. I'm glad to hear it. Their conversation flowed easily after that, touching on books they'd both read, memories of childhood, hopes for the future. As afternoon waned, they packed up reluctantly. We should head back, Zane said, helping her to her feet. I don't want to risk being caught out after dark. Their hands remained linked a moment longer than necessary, a current of awareness passing between them. Zane stepped closer, his gaze dropping to her lips. Brielle, he murmured. She lifted her face to his, heart racing. His kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, his arms encircled her, drawing her closer. The world narrowed to this moment, to the warmth of his embrace and the tenderness of his touch. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. I've wanted to do that since the day you joined me on the porch for coffee, Zane admitted. Brielle smiled, her cheeks flushed. I'm glad you finally did. The ride back to town was filled with stolen glances and brushing knees as their horses walked side by side. A new understanding existed between them now, unspoken but profound. At her door, Zane kissed her again, briefly but with promise. Sunday dinner tomorrow. I'll be there, she assured him. The following weeks established a rhythm to their courtship. Zane called on her regularly, sometimes for dinner at her small home, other times to escort her to community gatherings. On Sundays, she joined him at the ranch for dinner with Mrs. Donovan, who watched their blossoming relationship with undisguised approval. Autumn deepened into winter. Snow blanketed the landscape, transforming Fort Laramie into a pristine wonderland. The schoolhouse remained warm thanks to the large wood stove, and attendance was steady despite the weather. Brielle had won the respect of the community through her dedication and genuine care for her students. On Christmas Eve, the town gathered for a celebration in the church. Pine boughs decorated the simple building, and candles cast a warm glow over the festivities. Children performed a nativity play Brielle had organized, followed by carols sung with enthusiastic, if not always tuneful voices. Afterward, Zane drove Brielle to his ranch in his sleigh, lanterns lighting their way through the snowy darkness. Mrs. Donovan had outdone herself preparing a feast, and the three of them shared a joyful meal by firelight. When Mrs. Donovan retired for the evening, Zane led Brielle to the parlor, where a Christmas tree stood adorned with paper ornaments and strings of cranberries. I have something for you, he said, retrieving a small package from beneath the tree. Brielle unwrapped it carefully to find a silver locket on a delicate chain. Inside was a tiny photograph of her uncle, which Zane had obtained from a local photographer who had taken portraits of prominent citizens years earlier. "Oh, Zane," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." "There's more," he said softly. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Kneeling before her, he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small diamond. "Brielle Vanders, these past months have shown me what it means to truly love someone. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy washed over her like a warm wave. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to embrace her, his kiss conveying all the love words couldn't express. They agreed to marry in the spring when travel would be easier for guests from neighboring towns. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Fort Laramie, met with congratulations, and a few knowing smiles from those who had predicted this outcome from the start. Winter passed in a blur of happiness for Brielle. She divided her time between teaching and preparing for her new life with Zane. They made plans to expand the ranch house, adding rooms for the family they hoped to have. Zane visited her schoolhouse often, sometimes bringing books or supplies for the children, other times simply watching her teach with undisguised admiration. As the snow melted and the first wildflowers pushed through the softening earth, wedding preparations intensified. The entire town became involved. Women sewed a wedding dress of ivory satin ordered specially from Cheyenne. Men built tables for the feast that would follow the ceremony. Children practiced songs to perform. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, the first truly warm day of spring. Cherry blossoms adorned the church, their delicate fragrance filling the air. Mayor Jenkins, in his capacity as Justice of the Peace, would perform the ceremony. Mrs. Donovan helped Brielle dress, fussing over every detail like a mother preparing her daughter. "You look beautiful, my dear," she said, adjusting the veil one last time. "Like an angel." The church filled to capacity with well-wishers. Zane waited at the altar, resplendent in a new suit, his eyes never leaving Brielle as she walked down the aisle alone. In the absence of family, the entire community stood as witnesses to their union. "I, Zane, take you, Brielle, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Brielle repeated the vows, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When Mayor Jenkins pronounced them husband and wife, Zane's kiss sealed their commitment before God and community. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. As sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, Zane led his bride to a waiting carriage decorated with ribbons and flowers. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, helping her into the seat, "are you ready to go home?" Brielle smiled, the title still new and wonderful. "More than ready, Mr. Quinn." Their home welcomed them with lit lamps and a fire in the hearth, Mrs. Donovan having prepared everything before departing to stay with her sister in town for a few days, giving the newlyweds privacy. In the soft lamplight of their bedroom, Zane took Brielle in his arms. "I never thought I'd find love like this," he murmured against her hair. "When I found you in that barn, something told me my life would never be the same." "You saved me," she whispered. "Not just my life, but my heart." "We saved each other," he corrected gently, and then there were no more words, only the language of love shared between husband and wife. Spring blossomed into summer. Brielle completed the school year and made arrangements for a substitute teacher for the fall term. By then, her condition would make teaching difficult. She was expecting their first child in early December. Zane received the news with stunned joy, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the kitchen, until Mrs. Donovan scolded him for his exuberance. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Brielle's body rounded with new life, and Zane treated her with tender solicitude that sometimes made her laugh. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she told him one evening when he insisted on carrying her up the stairs. "Humor me," he replied, kissing her nose. "It's my first time being a father." In late November, as the first snow dusted the plains, Brielle's time came. Mrs. Donovan sent for the midwife and banished Zane to the parlor, where he paced for hours, flinching at each cry that echoed from upstairs. Finally, as dawn broke on a new day, the midwife appeared with a bundle in her arms. "Congratulations, Mr. Quinn. You have a son." Zane took the tiny form with trembling hands. The baby squinted up at him, perfect features scrunched in a yawn. "Hello, Daniel," he whispered, using the name they had chosen to honor Brielle's uncle. "Welcome to the world." He carried his son to Brielle, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. Placing the baby in her arms, he sat beside them, overwhelmed by the miracle before him. "We're a family now," Brielle said softly, stroking their son's downy head. "We always were," Zane replied, his voice husky with emotion. "From the moment I found you." The years that followed brought prosperity and joy to Zane and Brielle Quinn. The ranch thrived under their joint management, Brielle's education, and organizational skills complementing Zane's practical experience. Daniel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's eyes and his mother's gentle spirit. 2 years after his birth, a daughter joined the family, named Martha after Mrs. Donovan, who became her doting godmother. Brielle eventually returned to teaching, establishing a small school on the ranch for her children and those of the ranch hands. Her reputation as an educator spread, and neighboring ranchers often sent their children to learn from Mrs. Quinn's school, as it became known. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Zane took Brielle back to the waterfall where they had first kissed. They picnicked by the pool, watching their children play under Mrs. Donovan's watchful eye. "You ever regret it?" Zane asked as they sat hand in hand. "Coming west, staying here after everything that happened?" Brielle considered the question, watching Daniel help his little sister gather wildflowers. "How could I regret the journey that led me to this happiness?" she said. "Even the darkest moments were part of the path that brought us together." Zane squeezed her hand. "When I found you in that barn, I had no idea I was really finding my future, my heart. And I had no idea that the man who broke my chains would be the one I'd choose to bind my life to forever," she replied. 10 years passed, then 20. The Quinn Ranch became one of the largest and most successful in Wyoming territory. Daniel, grown to manhood, took on increasing responsibility, showing his father's aptitude for ranching and his mother's intelligence. Martha, spirited and determined, pursued her education at a women's college back east, returning with new ideas and a fierce commitment to her homeland. The town of Fort Laramie grew and changed with the times. The railroad brought new settlers, new opportunities. Through it all, Zane and Brielle remained a constant presence, respected leaders in the community they had helped shape. On a crisp autumn day much like the one when they first met, Zane and Brielle rode out to the old Wilson barn. Age had weathered it further, but it still stood, a silent witness to the beginning of their story. "I've been thinking," Zane said as they stood in the doorway, sunlight slanting through gaps in the roof. "We should preserve this place." Brielle looked at him questioningly. "Not as it is," he clarified, "but rebuilt as a schoolhouse. The children from the outlying homesteads have too far to travel to town. We could establish a proper school here with a teacher's residence attached." Brielle's eyes lit with understanding. "A place of learning where once there was suffering, a transformation. Like ours," he said, pulling her close. "From darkness to light." At 60, Brielle's hair had silvered and lines of laughter framed her eyes. Zane's tall frame had begun to stoop slightly, and his once dark hair had turned gray. But when he looked at her, she still saw the same love that had warmed her through decades of marriage. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "The best," she affirmed. "And it's not over yet, Zane Quinn. We have grandchildren to spoil, a school to build, and many more sunsets to watch together." He kissed her then in the place where their story began, the circle complete yet ever expanding with the ripples of love they had created together. The following spring, the new schoolhouse opened on the site of the old Wilson barn. Built of sturdy timber with large windows to let in light, it stood as a testament to transformation and hope. Above the door, a simple plaque read, "Quinn School where futures begin." On opening day, Brielle rang the school bell, its clear tone carrying across the prairie just as it had decades before in Fort Laramie. Children from surrounding homesteads filed in, eager and curious. At 72, Brielle had come full circle, back to her first calling but with the wisdom of a life richly lived. Zane watched from the doorway, pride shining in his eyes. Their grandchildren, Daniel's 2 boys and Martha's daughter, led the other students in a song of welcome for their grandmother's new endeavor. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant hues, Zane took Brielle's hand, the same hand he had freed from chains all those years ago. "You remember what I told you the day I found you?" he asked. Brielle smiled. "You said many things that day. I promised you that those men would never touch you again," he recalled. "But I think I was really promising myself something too, that I would spend the rest of my life making sure you knew only kindness and love from that day forward." "A promise well kept," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "And I've tried to do the same for you, to be the kind of wife, partner, and friend you deserve." "You've been all that and more," he assured her. "When I think of how close we came to never meeting if I hadn't felt drawn to that barn that particular morning." "Perhaps it wasn't chance," Brielle suggested. "Perhaps it was always meant to be." They fell silent, content in each other's company as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Their life together hadn't been without challenges, drought years that threatened the ranch, illnesses, disagreements, the natural friction that occurs when 2 strong individuals share a life. But through it all, they had maintained the foundation built in those early days: respect, honesty, and a love that had only deepened with time. "I love you, Zane Quinn," Brielle said softly. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "And I love you, Brielle Quinn," he replied. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." Together they watched night settle over the land they both loved, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating as one, the rancher and the woman he had found chained in an abandoned barn, whose lives had changed forever in that moment of discovery. And in that quiet twilight, surrounded by the legacy they had built together, they knew with absolute certainty that their love story, begun in darkness and blossoming in light, would continue to inspire long after they were gone, a testament to the transformative power of courage, compassion, and unwavering love.